Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Medtech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technologies. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
Today, we're delighted to be joined by Sreekar Kothamachu, CEO and founder of Nesa Medtech. Sreekar, welcome to the show. It's great to see you. You were part of Impact Cohort 3, our sponsor, Hologic, and you came across to Boston, I think it was about 7 or 8 months ago now. So delighted to see you again. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Richard and Kyle, for having me today. I'm really excited to share Nesa's story today.
Amazing. So let's kick things off. Tell us, whereabouts in the world are you? And why don't you share a little bit of your background as well, please?
Yeah, I'm joining from Bangalore, India today, and a bright summer. It's also known as the Silicon Valley of the East. During my school days, I was always fascinated about medicine. And during my holidays time, I used to spend quite a lot with my uncle, who was training in medicine during that time. So my holiday time was going and spending time with him. But during my college days, I developed interest in computer science and programming. So I picked up computer science as my major during my college days. But destiny had its own turn for me. Medicine and computer science came together. So that's when my first job was in Siemens. I joined as a software engineer there, and then went on to work with Philips and spent almost about 15 years with both of these companies together. That was my background in medical devices.
A fantastic foundation and really bringing that technical skills background to the table. So you've had this incredible journey. You've been inspired to take it to that next level. What's the big problem you're trying to solve? And what's kind of led you to this point?
Sure. So as I was working at Philips, one of our other team which was working was basically in Israel. So what it meant was I used to frequently travel to Israel, spend quite a time there, understand the ecosystem there, and also work with the team there. During my time at Israel, that's when I got a chance to spend time with a lot of Medtech serial entrepreneurs there. I was really fascinated about their journey and also the kind of impact which they were creating. What I realized being in the larger organization, though it gives you a great foundation, is you generally work with incremental innovation. So that's where I saw the kind of activities which these guys were doing in the medtech, specifically in the startup space, was actually revolutionary and like leapfrog innovation. I was quite fascinated about it. And as I was spending more and more time, I realized maybe I should really explore entrepreneurship as a way to leapfrog innovation. During this time, I understood about something called Stanford Biodesign Engineering process, which is again a scientific way of identifying unmet needs. When I came back from a short stint at Israel, I took a sabbatical at my work at Philips to explore what really unmet need which I need to solve. So that's when I spent almost about 6 months at various hospital systems. In India, there are public-run hospitals which have limited resources because it's funded by the state. But there are this really advanced hospital systems run by the private family hospitals and groups, which have the best ecosystem. So during this time, I actually met a woman who was like about 35 years, who has severe symptoms and problems associated with the post-surgical complications. So that's when I started understanding the space and trying to address what really she's going through. That's when I understood she had a clinical condition called uterine fibroids, and she had some really suboptimal outcomes from the surgery. So then I went through her entire journey of what the problem she had and the kind of solutions which she was trying to go through it. So that was the genesis in which I got to know about a problem called uterine fibroids. And what we are working on is a treatment, an alternative to a traditional surgical treatment for uterine fibroids.
That's really interesting, Sreekar. And I, was really fascinated too. I'd love to talk more about that journey that woman went on. So what was that journey like? What were the type of treatments she was going through, and why wasn't it working? And how did that, really open your eyes to just identifying a different way to treat uterine fibroids?
Sure. So this lady was a 35-year-old, very active in her professional career, and had about 2 kids. She used to frequently miss her work, like every month on month. She used to frequently miss her work, and then she underwent a surgery called hysterectomy, which is removal of uterus. And unfortunately, she had some complications around the hysterectomy procedure, and she was there in the hospital for almost about a week, and she was not able to support the family and other things. So when I really went through her journey, so she had uterine fibroids for almost 4 years, and like the general symptoms which a patient with uterine fibroids would have is prolonged and heavy menstrual bleeding, which is generally a very taboo aspect in the society. So because she was she had so much prolonged menstruation, so she turned out to be anemic, and she was not able to go to her work. So that's how she used to miss the visits. And she was suggested for a surgery a few years back. But just that the current solution itself is so invasive in nature. And just imagine either you or your loved ones having to go and uterus removal surgery in an age of 35, which is like really, really unfortunate. So she had to just postpone the surgery, bear with the symptoms, just manage with it. At one stage, the symptoms became really, really worse that she had to undergo the surgery.
And that's a hysterectomy surgery?
Yes, that's
and now a hysterectomy, isn't that, that's the removal of the uterus. So now, unfortunately, at that point when you make that decision, you're not able to, produce offspring, have children. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right.
And another thing you touched on there, I mean, I guess what I wanted to highlight was just the taboo nature of talking about this type of disease, because the frequency is actually incredibly high. And whilst most women can live with the condition quite comfortably, there's still a huge frequency of a high level of pain and discomfort that gets caused. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought it up, Richard. That's exactly when I really heard her story, and I was like really moved by it. So then when I went and spoke to my mother and my aunt about it, I realized that they do have fibroids. In fact, my mother had fibroid, and my aunt also had a fibroid, and my mother was able to bear the symptoms, and she could just prolong it. But my aunt also underwent an hysterectomy at a very early age of less than 40 years. So, and we were never told about it in the family, and we never had it in our family discussions. So that's when I realized it's such a silent health problem, and it's such a prevalent. 1 in 4 women have fibroids, and specifically in communities of Latin American and also in Afro-Asian community, it's much more. And it's not specific to any particular geography, it is spread across. And when I heard more and more about it, I was really moved by what the fibroids as such and the impact it's creating on women's health. And there's a very beautiful publication which is done by a scientist who has done research in the public space. She clearly told that it's such a silent problem. The impact of it is much bigger than breast and cervical cancer. Generally, when we think about women's health, it is about, say, breast cancer or a cervical cancer. But uterine fibroid, the impact of it is much, much, much significant than both of these problems.
Yeah, and again, there's this whole timescale of silent suffering, and of course, again, that ultimate, last resort is removing the uterus. But the frequency that occurs, I mean, I think it's nearly half of all uterus removals are due to uterine fibroids.
Yeah, that's right. In US alone, about 200,000 surgeries are done just for uterine fibroids. The uterus removal is done, which is really unfortunate. Where as we advance towards the technology, but still we rely on, say, like very traditional surgical methods of removing the uterus. It was really, really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.
Well,
Well, that's
Kyle,
it.
I can
That's it.
understand
Yeah.
why he's inspired. I mean, like, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of waiting to hear now what that next thing is coming to the market.
Well, I was just going to say, Richard, that's exactly why Nesa is here, because, we want to hear now about your technology and how it's improving outcomes and, changing the game in this area.
Right. So it was very clear to us that as a woman, as a lady or a woman who undergoes diagnosis of fibroids, the literature itself says that they wait almost till 3.6 years to seek a surgical intervention and seek symptomatic relief. So the whole idea for us as we were starting to work on it was to figure out a way that let's develop a solution which is least invasive, so that you and also you have very great outcomes of the procedure, so that they don't have to go through the surgical procedure. So what we have developed at Nesa is a technology called Guide. What it means is it is a completely no scar, no cut. The procedure time is just about 50% compared to the existing surgical procedure. The recovery time for a procedure like is just about 2 days compared to 6 to 8 weeks of a traditional surgical procedure. And very, very importantly, the uterus is preserved. So that's what we are developing. And the way we are developing the technology to realize all of this is, so generally, any patient who has uterine fibroids is diagnosed with something called ultrasound, where the fibroids. What we have developed is a technology which actually sits on top of the ultrasound, which is like a software module, which actually takes this ultrasound images, generates a 3D rendered model of the uterus and exact location of the fibroid and the volume of the fibroid, which we coined that as a GPS of the fibroids. It tells you where exactly the fibroids are. And then we have a technology called guidance system, which actually places through the natural orifice of the system of the patient, which means there is no cut, there is no suture. You go to that exact location of the fibroid, and then we just deliver heat energy to the fibroid, and over a period of time, the fibroid reduces in size.
So that's really interesting, Sreekar. So essentially, you locate the fibroid using your technology, which is an ultrasound type of technology, and then you deliver that energy to the fibroid. And what happens to that fibroid? It kind of, I guess, you cook it in a way, and then it naturally passes through the body or dissolves. Is that how it goes?
Yeah. So what happens is, as you heat up the fibroid, it gets necrosed. That means the blood supply to the fibroid stop, and it necroses over a period of time, and the tumor reduces in size.
Wow. Okay. And it very impressive. I mean, Richard, we've seen a number of minimally invasive technologies, especially coming through the impact program. And I think what's so unique about Sreekar is that energy driven, that energy-based technology, using energy therapy to treat these patients in a minimally invasive, manner. No incision too, which is, even more impressive.
Absolutely, Kyle. It looks like you're raising the bar on multiple levels. So tell us a little bit more about the recovery process. Is that then, are they ready to go back to work the following day, or what does that look like for the patients?
Right. So by the way, we coined this technology as micro-invasive. So I think we have started to move from open to micro-invasive, minimally invasive to micro-invasive. So we coin our technology as a micro-invasive technology. So the recovery time here, so by the way, as the procedure time here is generally 50% of the traditional surgical procedure. So the hospital resources which you use, or the physician time to do the procedure, is significantly lesser. So after this procedure, the patient can go back on the same day, and we can do the procedure in an ambulatory setup. You don't need a like an operation theater do the setup, do the procedure. As the patient goes through the procedure, the patient goes back on the same day. In couple of days, they get back to normal work, and within a week, they can get to normal physical activities as well. Which in case of a general traditional surgical procedure, it's suggested for at least like few weeks before they get back to normal life.
And
Fantastic.
what about the pain too? Like at what point will the patient start, if they're experiencing pain from the fibroids, at what point does that pain maybe start to subside?
Right. So here, generally, the patients who present with fibroids are are someone who have with prolonged menstruation. That's the most common one.
Okay.
So what we are trying to tell is when we reduce the size of the fibroids within at least 2-3 menstruation cycles, their symptoms would significantly reduce.
Fantastic.
Amazing. And I'm sure going on this journey, it's not been without its challenges. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the problems you've had to overcome, and whether that's from a funding aspect or the technical or scientific aspects.
Right. So I think for us, for any startup founder, if you speak, fundraising would be on the top of the list. But I think for us, it was more about the technology, what we are building. How do we really differentiate from the existing technology? How do we really build the technology in perspective with keeping the patient as a center? So generally what I realized when I started off was, and I being an engineer, we always concentrate on the technology front. But over a period of time, as I was slowly developing various generations of the technologies, you need to keep always the patient as the center, make sure that you bring the right value proposition to the patient, and also keeping all these stakeholders in tandem. So keeping the regulator, keeping the payer, keeping the hospital system as the other paradigms. So I think for us, the challenge was and first trying to understand the regulatory pathway, which was quite okay. The other thing, definitely, we being a OUS company, understanding the payer aspect, what it really takes, how do we really bring in the value proposition there, was a very important aspect where we spent quite a bit of time there. I think one very key thing is for any technology as we are building, you need to keep the patient as the center. Without that, you would really miss out on the impact which you would be creating in the space.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what about, you're obviously building what sounds to be maybe a fairly sophisticated piece of hardware. What about supply chain aspects too, especially right now, for an organization, a smaller, growth or startup company, have you ran into any kind of supply chain related challenges and from building your product and sourcing parts and components?
Yeah, so that's one thing which I think we were very fortunate. Just being this part of the world, supply chain was not really as impacted as it was in the other part of the world. So, and in our case, we also had a few options of our backup supply chain, supply vendors in place. So fortunately, we didn't face the issue of the supply chain, but in case if we had backup options in place as well.
Well, yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to ask too. Obviously Richard and I, we're over here and we talk to a lot of US based companies, and obviously, when the pandemic hit and, it caused so many disruptions, but it's interesting to get your perspective, being located in India and how you, maybe not felt the impacts as much as we did over here. But it's also great to hear how you had that diversity throughout your supply chain, which is so important. It allows you to be nimble and dynamic. There's no doubt. So, great points there. And what about the competitive landscape of your technology? We would imagine there could be other types of competitors that are bringing, certain technologies to market. What is that treat uterine fibroids? What does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, so absolutely. So when we look at the competitive landscape here, that this traditional surgical procedures, which is like the open surgery or the laparotomy. Then you have the minimally invasive procedures like the laparoscopy and the hysteroscopy.
Is
So
that through
this is,
the abdomen?
yeah,
Okay.
laparoscopic.
So there is an incision with those then, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay. Okay.
And this is where companies like the Olympus, the Strikers, and traditional endoscopic surgical companies operate, and they have their own, say, the cautery or energy systems in place.
Sure.
And then this non-surgical solutions which are there, which are like uterine artery embolization, or there's something called MRI guided focus ultrasound. So these are typically operated by an interventional radiologist. Unfortunately, there are only few in number, even in US as well. And generally, a patient who presents with uterine fibroids would go to an gynecologist. You need to have a good referral system to an interventional radiologist to operate. Unfortunately, it's really not well established. And the pre and the post surgery, post the procedure needs to be taken by a gynecologist. So unfortunately, the non-surgical solutions do not really address for a large number of patients. In the space we operate on, using like heat energy, using imaging systems, so there are other couple of solutions, but one of them again does an incision based, which is again laparoscopic route, that is again for specific clinicians. So there's another company as well who operates again using ultrasound based, but they use something called an intrauterine ultrasound, which means there's an ultrasound which goes into the cavity and treats it. But what we are trying to say is, in all of the gynecologists, there's an ultrasound sitting in the gynecologist. Why not we make it smarter, and so that you have a lesser capital equipment in the hospital, and you know the device really well. You just use it same as it is, and our software is smart enough to tell you where the fibroids are, and the kind of the probe which we have developed is very similar to existing solutions which are there. So it's this least learning curve, and you can use the device and you can reach to that exact location and deliver the therapy.
So cool. And it's great to hear that obviously supply chain issues haven't been a problem for you, but can you now maybe touch on where you are on your product development journey? You know, what's currently happening and what's kind of been some of the recent success you've been celebrating?
Sure. So we have a device developed in 2 generations. The generation 1 device is already been say developed. We have it regulatory cleared in India right now. We are an ISO 13485 company. So we are deploying these devices in few of the reputed hospitals in India right now to get more efficacy data and feedback of that. But what's exciting is, as we are doing this on the generation 1, we are developing our generation 2 device, which is specifically designed for the US and the European market, where we already have like a pilot units manufactured. And in fact, we are going through an incremental regulatory approval as well. In fact, we already have filed our first 510(k) as well, which is currently under review. So what's exciting to us is getting this Gen 2 device into the hands of US clinicians very soon. But that's something which we are really, really excited about.
Very cool. And in terms of the clinical trials, where are you on that process? You know, you talked a little bit there about the regulatory pathway.
Yeah, so we have done quite a bit of clinical work in India right now for our generation 1 device. We have already got it cleared. So what we are doing right now is building up clinical efficacy data on our generation 1, making sure that we follow up on the patients for a large amount of time, and to see that they're recouping well after the procedure. So that's something which we are doing right now.
So you're in human, right? You're using this in these clinical trials. I guess, you know, it sounds like you're pretty close though. I mean, to be in human, right? Studies, you know, not an animal anymore. You're that much close to FDA. What does that kind of FDA approval look like? And what are you trying to achieve? Is this PMA, 510(k)? And when would that, you know, when might that come?
Sure. So it's a 510K 510K pathway, and we already had a couple of conversations with the FDA through the pre-submission meeting. So we really understand what they're looking out for, and Nesa and FDA are aligned about what's the requirements to get through the 510K clearance. So at this stage, because we are really keen on looking at generation 2 device taking to the 510K clearance at this stage, because the Gen 2 is also under product development. The idea is to get the product development in place for the Gen 2. And we are looking at as early as next year to start building up the regulatory material to be starting to submit to FDA.
Interesting. So that sounds like a short-term type of, next step for the organization. Will that require additional funding?
Yes, so we are in the midst of process of raising an additional funding. At this stage, we have raised funds from HNIs, family fund officers, and clinicians who believe in our technology have invested in the company. Yeah, we are in the midst of raising another round.
Is that going to be a series type of round or a seed round?
Yeah, so that would be more like a pre-series A round.
Yeah. Okay, great. And when are you trying to have that capital, those financing raised by?
So we have a majority of the pre-series A round already committed. So the idea is to do it about a few months from now.
Well, it sounds like you're in great shape then. That's great to hear. Definitely,
Kyle. I think, it's great hearing Sreekar's story, how he's taken this inspiration and actually turning this into a true innovative product. I'm sure along this journey, you've had many supporters, but I wondered if there's anyone who stands out who's helped you along the way. And of course, you've probably built a fantastic team supporting you as well.
Right. I think it's really, really important to have a very well-rounded team who keep you grounded when you really achieve some really big milestones. And when you're also in trouble, they are the ones who will help you in picking up and saying that, yeah, there are lots of things to be done. I think I owe a lot of credit to my well-rounded and a very experienced team. I think they would be a very, very important part of Nesa's journey.
Superb.
Team is everything. We know that, Richard. Right? Takes a village. Absolutely. There's no doubt. So those are great points, And I guess kind of reflecting back, Sreekar, what's kind of some of, advice or learning experiences that you've had that, others who are trying to bring new technologies, medtech to market, what do you have to say to them? What's that advice? What are those experiences? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think I would definitely say you alone cannot do all the things, and you need to have a very strong, diversified team. So diversified team is not only on the technology side or what expertise they bring to the table. It's also about the background which they bring to the table as well. I think that's really, really important. And I should say medtech is hard. It's really, really hard. And you need to have patience. Patience is really, really critical. Patience and perseverance is really, really important as part of the journey. I think that's something which I would definitely say to any medtech entrepreneurs or who would want to take this journey. I think it's really, really important. And also keeping all the stakeholders in perspective. I think I should definitely say, as I started this journey, I was more focused about, we are building a very great technology. But over a period of time, I realized technology is just one part of it. Having a good eye on the regulatory, the payer, the hospitals really benefit from what you're doing. And at the end of the day, patients, are they really looking forward to something for your solution? I think keeping that holistic aspect is really, really important.
And it's clear that you're doing that. I mean, you've touched on some of the milestones that you've already achieved, but what do the milestones look ahead in terms of what would you like to be in a year's time in terms of those goals?
Sure. So I think a couple of important things is as we are doing more clinical activities in India, the efficacy data, doing it in large number of patients would be very important, and starting to publish it in reputed journals would be a very important milestone. And the other part is on the generation 2 device, getting all the facets of the product and the technology in place and starting to speak to the FDA on the submission process. I think that would be another important aspect.
Superb, Kyle. Well, I'm confident Sreekar's the man to lead on this, but I'm sure we're also wondering ourselves, like, what does that vision look in 5 years' time? What's the kind of the grand plan? Where would you like to be?
Sure. I think we are really, really excited on what we could really touch upon on the impact which we can create in women's health space. And the idea is to get this technology to as many clinicians as possible. And we strongly believe that though we are developing the technology from India, but this is a technology, we are developing it for the world. So we are really, really excited about taking this technology to all different geographies around the world and getting into the hands of clinicians.
Wonderful, Sreekar. And where do people go to learn more about Nesa Medtech and your technology and even about you? You know, where can they find you?
Sure. The best way to connect to me is through LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. And to know more about the technology, we do have an active LinkedIn page, so you can find more about us there. And you can also reach out to us at info@nesamedtech.com, info@nesamedtech.com. And we would be glad to collaborate with any partners who are around and be part of the journey of transforming women's health.
Wonderful. Well, Sreekar and Richard, what a great discussion today. Amazing technology, just an amazing leader, Sreekar, you are, and what you're doing in the women's health space and how you're treating women who are battling and suffering from uterine fibroids and improving lives and outcomes in those areas. Quite inspiring. So we can't thank you enough for being on the show today and sharing your story and technology to the world. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. It was a great conversation, and I must give due credit to the Impact program and the M2D2 for being a torchbearer for us in this journey. And I really thank the Impact program for this as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Sreekar. Well, it's been truly inspirational for you to share your story. We thank you for your time. But that's it for us, Kyle. So you want to wrap things up here?
That was Sreekar Kothamachu from Nesa Medtech. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. And until next time, keep innovating.